Rare podcast, we bring on Ryan Lung. You've probably seen his skits, maybe you've seen his stand-up comedy. He's absolutely hilarious. I saw him live in his new special. Before I bring him on to have some real conversations, funny conversations, and talk about the news today, here's a few highlights from some of his recent clips that I thought was hilarious.
My name is Dustin and I hate big pharmaceutical companies, except for Pfizer. You know, I did go to Occupy Wall Street. Now I'm a little more concerned with occupying a space in my tattoo sleeve with my new Pfizer tat.
Pfizer.
You Pfizer? You?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial identity is the most important thing. Everything should be looked at through the lens of race.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke. We both have a lot of opinions about people of color, even though we barely know any.
I say colored people, but as long as we're classifying them, we both think minorities are a united group who think the same and act the same. Good, yeah. Oh yeah, I watched the Martin Shkreli doc and it pissed me off what he did raising those prices. What an ethical company does is take money from the government to make the product, have the government force people to buy the product, get the government to pay for your commercials, then print money to subsidize it. If you asked me a couple years ago, I wouldn't have thought that I'd be wearing a big pharmaceutical company's t-shirt, but you know, Pfizer's just different, you know what I mean? They're not like other companies. Hi, I'm John.
And I'm his roommate, Ron.
Together, we are defined by Trump.
Trump just tweeted out our new opinion on corona numbers.
I was just wondering what we thought of that. I realized early on that instead of taking the time to formulate opinions and a perspective, it was much easier to find out what Donald Trump says and angrily disagree.
Or in my case, enthusiastically agree. Once I know he's right, I don't have to think anymore. Just Google Street View to see if the wall is there yet. Still no, we'll get it by his fourth term though.
Hi, MS-13. Just wondering if one of your generals are available to babysit my nephews?
Trump's opinions are always changing, so ours are too.
Man, so what's going on, Ryan? Thank you for being here. And
What a compilation.
I do what I can. I want to talk about your new stand-up because I got to catch a lot of it live. I think, I don't know if it was exactly the same because everyone's different, but when you were in Orange County, I came with Patriot J, Olivia, his girlfriend. We got to see it, and man, I was laughing the whole time. I thought it was your funniest stuff. Like, I've seen some of your stand-ups, but I was so grateful to be there because you had me crying the whole time.
Yeah, dude, that was such a fun night. I'm glad you guys came through. And now, yeah, I felt like that was a good show, right?
No, it was super good, dude. We were laughing hysterically because you really went in on so many topics so quick. Like, you know, just like, I knew you didn't care, but certain ones you hit were I was telling him off camera, me and Patriot J were crying. And I love a good, like, whether it's about race or women, because first of all, most people are laughing hysterically, but there's always going to be like someone or a girlfriend that like looks over to say like, you know, you better not be laughing at that, and it makes it 20 times funnier when some people are like shocked that people are still.
No one likes it when you make fun of their thing, right? But there is always the cultural context. Like, that's a thing people always talk about, like punching up and punching down. Like, to me, the punching up is, you know, punching against what everyone else is saying, really, right?
Right.
It's like, what's the consciousness and the energy of the world, kind of, right?
Right.
You know what's funny? Dude, I did the Will Smith video. I was like, I've been like, we talked about him when you did my podcast, right? The Boy Scout. And I've been like kind of making fun of the Will Smith stuff for like a while. And I was saying that was one of the most I've ever gotten people furious at me. Like, legitimately, there would be a moment where my phone was just like ding, 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 it with people, you know, whatever, messaging or tagging me and stuff. There's like, this is not okay, like whatever, all the things.
Before
right?
Or after the slap, because I know you did the endowments or entanglements or whatever, like Jay does entanglements, and it was like guys that bang. That was such a funny skit. You did it when all that news was coming out, and then the slap hit, you reposted it. When did you get the backlash? Before or like after the slap?
Before, but afterwards it went more, like it did like 2 million views afterwards too. And then I released another one that says, basically the gist of it is that they're like, essentially being like, acting like making a joke about like bald wife's hair is the worst thing you could do. So I was just kept saying like, you know, I think anything's okay in comedy except for bald wife jokes. It's the pinnacle of you know, the things you're not supposed to talk about. But so you never know, that people just don't like their thing. And then I did one recently about mental illness, and the idea was this week. Yeah. The idea was, it's a kind of a joke I've been doing on stage, but you see a lot of people that, or, you know, we need to normalize mental illness. It's all, you know, mental illness is like the top topic, right? For a lot of these people, right? And then whenever you see someone that's like an actual lunatic, you know, how do they treat him? They're essentially, you know, kick that guy off the internet. Like, let's pretend he doesn't exist. Like, you know what it looks like when someone's manic, when they're all over the place. Right. And that's the kind of people that ends up saying wild shit, you know, especially really wild stuff, right? Especially if they get wrapped up in any sort of like outside culture, right? Like
And
those
for those
people are
who didn't see
easily
that
influenced.
video, that video, because some people might not have seen it, it was basically making fun of how like actors are always kind of opportunists when it comes to mental health, right? Like we care about mental health, but then in the skit, the one guy was like literally like full blown insane, and the actors and people were like, yeah, maybe you're not good for this commercial, like as if they're almost just trying to romanticize it and make it like trendy, but they're not actually concerned with like full blown mental illness.
Everyone likes like a hot actress. It's like, I'm sad, right? Like that's half of TikTok right now. But no, what they don't like is the guy that's like, they're friggin' watching us, man. Like, you know what I mean? That.
Right, right.
So
When
yeah,
it
it's
comes to
like
the Will
anytime.
Smith one too, can you explain that to people who maybe haven't seen it? Like what your joke was in that skit, what the premise was?
I just did a bunch of guys that had sex with his wife because I've been making fun of the Will Smith for a while because to some degree, it was like, to me, it wasn't, it was fair game in the sense that I honestly felt like they were doing this on purpose. Like every time, he was trying to sell a biography, and these guys know the game, the same way that Kanye just happens to have a big controversy, every time a week before any big launch he has, right? So these guys, the Smiths have their big red table show, and then they're releasing this biography. And lo and behold, the moment before the big release, a week before, they just keep releasing all these weird things. Like,
Right.
she's having sex with, all of his kids' friends. And he's, I was puking when I was having sex with, and just all this like
Right,
wacky stuff. Right. And he's like,
right. So with Will, he put out a biography because we talked about it on your podcast where he's talking about throwing up with girls during sex. Like it's very weird, but he wrote it, right? It's like his biography. And then you had that him and Will thing when she cheated or something. I don't even know, but they brought it
yeah.
on television where it almost looked like a 60 Minutes. They sat at a table with cameras. So I agree with that, where I like to keep private like private. And in comedy, I think anything's on the table, especially when you're a celebrity, but it's not like, Ryan's in the bushes, like filming and finding this information and leaking it to Project Veritas. It's like they're putting it on television, on YouTube, writing books about it, screaming it to the world on the biggest platforms. And then you make fun of it. And they're like, I'm like, how could you not make fun of Will Smith, like hurling out of disgust during sex? Like it is just such a bizarre thing to say that how could you not talk about it?
And there's this weird thing where I think that why it's extra funny sometimes is kind of like, let's say, your friend, came out of the closet or something that was, kind of supposed to be a moment, right? Where it was supposed to be like this vulnerable moment. Like to me, like making fun of them in that is so funny. Like your friend,
Right.
because it's just anytime it's the opposite of what's expected, right? Like if you were like, listen, man, like, my grandma just died, and like, you go, oh my God,
Right.
like good. I'm so happy. Like, that girl's a bitch. Like to me, that's just funny.
With dark
Because you're not
comedy, it's
supposed
like
to.
when people are so uptight, that almost makes it funnier, right? When
Of
people are like, you
course.
can't say that. My friend one time, I've never said this, but the podcast, I think it's a place. My friend was telling me something about like, he was like, yo, this something to do with like gay. And I sent him a meme of like Pastor Anderson, who's like a hardline right wing, anti-gay preacher. I just sent him a gif of that, like him screaming, when he was trying to like tell me something. One, I thought it was hilarious, right? Because it's like one, I'm just like, what would Pastor Anderson say to you? But also I'm thinking, oh man, that makes it that much funnier. Like taking a serious time and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like an uncalled for joke.
Well, so Will Smith was like this Hollywood guy, and because of the culture, they're like, vulnerability is very, rewarded, right? So the idea that we kind of go and put this all on the table, everyone's going to celebrate us and say how great we are. And to me, just like doing the opposite is so funny. But
What do you think as somebody that does comedy and stuff? Like, do you think people are saying it's staged? It wasn't. I don't really have a big belief. Like, do you think they staged that for publicity too, or do you think
has
that
anyone talked about this? Do you think we should cover it? The Will Smith thing?
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's not. I
I'm
don't
just
think
making
people.
fun of
Yeah. Do you
Has
think
this
it was?
come up on any podcast? I don't think it was staged. I think he's just a weird dude. Um, the when you're mentioning the pastor, one thing that I was just thinking about like today when I was walking over here, because I've been talking about this on stage a bit, but I feel like, I don't know if I've ever said this to you, but I always kind of say that there's like a war on noticing things. Like people want you to not notice things. And
Right.
I feel like one of the first times that I realized that everyone was like so full of shit is I remember, not realized, but whatever. One of the cardinal ones is we were talking to like this comic friend I know, and they were like, which guy was it? and we were like, oh, he sounds like a gay guy. He's like, whatever, like kind of acts like a gay guy. And she was like, well, what do you mean what does a gay guy act like? And we're just like, what are you out of your, are you being serious right now? And it's like that being so, trying to play the game that you have to pretend you don't know what a gay guy
looks like. Oh, he looked like a linebacker, just deep voice, you know what I'm saying? Like barreled over some dudes.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't know. He was a little flamboyant, I guess you
like it's some big what gay guy would you ever say that to? Like where you would go, oh, they can't tell if a guy's gay. Of course you can, right?
Yeah.
It's like obvious, right? And I was like loving the idea of this. Like that's the only sexuality that you can tell. But no other sexual thing you can tell they're into it by the way they look. Maybe like a furry or something crazy, but you go, so you can't tell by looking at someone whether they like big boobs or small boobs, but you can tell whether they like boobs. Period. Right? Just by your voice.
I wanted to bring this up real quick. The Goldman Sachs thing you talked about. I have the article. I'm gonna read it, and like it's gonna be hard not to laugh because I found a CNN clip of it, and the way they're making this guy sound cool.
Davey
they're
Dave?
sound like Diplo. All right. I gotta just unmute myself. All right, CNN Business. It says Goldman Sachs CEO will perform at Lollapalooza. This is not a joke or a Babylon Bee. I guess he's really like a DJ, the CEO of Goldman Sachs. So they said Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon will DJ at Chicago's Lollapalooza Music Festival this July, alongside acts like Metallica, Dua Lipa, Doja Cat, and Green Day. The 60-year-old who moonlights as an electric dance DJ when he's not running one of the largest investment banks in the world has brought in record-breaking profits at Goldman while spinning records. I don't feel like actually reading the rest of it, but like it's so funny. They're like Dua Lipa, Green Day, and the Goldman Sachs CEO DJ. Yeah,
DJ creating the financial crisis. But apparently, so if you're in the DJ community, a lot of people like know him. So it's not this, he came outside. Apparently, when he was at Goldman Sachs, they were trying to get him to stop DJing. And they were saying, the board at Goldman Sachs was like, yo, you can't be out here DJing. This is like bad behavior for the CEO of Goldman Sachs. It's a bad look. And he was kind of like, no, I'm a DJ through and through. This is the life. This is me. You're going to pry my turntables out of my
I will leave the Federal Reserve behind for my DJing career. He's like, I will, global domination is it will be left behind. You got to respect that almost, right? I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But so in the scene, he's very that. I feel like DJing is where musicians go once they're sort of cast aside for whatever reason, the same way that entertainment people always go into crypto after they're in trouble. Like how, dude, there's yeah. There's so many, like Hollywood execs or whatever that got, canceled for one reason or another and all became crypto guys. It's like the trajectory.
Like pumping and dumping like a Doge Star coin. They're like, dude, Dogecoin's cool, but Doge Star coin is 0.0001 cents, 10 trillion coins, and I'm going bankrupt. So I got, they paid me up.
Yeah. Pumping some weird stock or being involved in, a new decentralized project that's kind of funded or whatever, which some of the stuff maybe, whatever, most of those things, like anything, most of them end up not doing anything, but some of them will. But he was early adopter of being a hedge fund guy that didn't get canceled. And he was just, he loved the game,
I mean, he's on his Bezos, right? Like when Bezos started getting jacked, wearing like Hawaiian shirts, hang out with like,
he was reading like the game,
surgery chicks. So I guess that's how you would have to do it if you control that big of, have some fun. I mean, I can't really hate on the guy. It's like, I don't like Goldman Sachs. I don't like the fact that they're romanticizing it, but what's the point of, if you're doing tough work or running the world, you might as well, get a little lit to the side.
Well, I'd say the other thing where you go, he couldn't be, if you were into DJing, the same reason if I know these comic friends that you go, oh, this guy works 80 hours at some corporate job and then he sort of moonlights at comedy. You go, well, obviously this guy's not going to be that good because I know how hard this is, right? The same reason you couldn't moonlight at being the best in the world at anything. So maybe there is something to be said about from the music perspective. You go, this guy's not taking this seriously. He won't even quit his Goldman Sachs job. He's trying to have his cake and eat it too.
I want to see a set if it's like a situation where it's like some brainwashing thing, like they put on the sick beat and it's like Ukraine flag in the bio. They're like George Floyd,
Yeah.
BLM, 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 and the kids are turning. I'm like, yo, he's like, take your stocks and invest with us, invest with us, invest with us. And then people are just high off Molly. They're like, dude, I do need a Fidelity account. They're like, maybe I do need a 401k. They're like, I should have got a Roth IRA. He's just
I
like,
bet you that idea that, that people like all those big companies, obviously their marketing is very, whatever, like we have like a rainbow flag and or whatever. But, what percentage of like dudes that work at Goldman Sachs is like hedge traders are actually, I mean, those guys are all, who they voted for.
yeah, they're getting lit. Like if you work in that, I'm not saying everybody, there's probably some straight laced people, but it's such like grueling number work that, and they make so much money that I'm sure a lot of them do a lot of things. It's not like they're just counting money. When they're off the clock, they probably go crazy. Like, they probably turn up super hard.
Yeah, all those hedge fund dudes are in New York, just fucking blowing through money, and
Right.
it's sort of part of the lifestyle because a lot of those companies, when you work in these kind of industries, they give people these essentially, expense allowances, for clients and all that stuff. So it's almost like a big perk where I'll let them make like 300 a year or something like that, not these, plus bonuses. So it's good money, but they get these, 50 grand a year just to go spend. So it's almost like encouraged that you just kind of like be a New York party boy.
They get like a voucher to like the DJ, the CEO. They just get $150,000 voucher to him at Lollapalooza.
Yeah, a
I
lot.
saw
Bezos was though. It is funny. Bezos being like, that's been one of my favorite things lately.
I
Is
like
Bezos
that.
being like a straight up Miami party boy,
Yeah, I
and
kind of like it.
and
It's not like he's my favorite person, but it's like Bill Gates looks disgusting. Like, like Jeff Bezos is doing what you should do if you take that real estate.
you should definitely become a Miami party boy that read the game. He's part of the manosphere.
He's like morphing into Pitbull, right? Every picture he looks
Yeah.
more and more like the R&B singer Pitbull. He's
I
just
always love the pickup artist stuff makes me laugh so much too. I'm not saying he actually was into it, but it's always some like pretty jack dude that's like has money convincing a lot of people that are bad with girls to use their techniques. So that it'd all be like, you got to kind of neg girls and say bad things, and then you have some like autistic weirdo being girls like your face is disfigured, and the girls and he goes, "What the
right,
hell? This isn't working. I want my money
right.
back."
Oh my
He's
gosh,
like,
that's
I
so
haven't
true,
received my allotted quantity of sex.
right. For those who don't know, a lot of these pickup artists, like there's people spending money for courses that are bad with girls, and they're telling them to do what is it called, like negging or something, where you're
Stuff
supposed to
that
like
works for
put
cool
them
guys,
down and
yeah.
put them up, like put them back and forth, give them a psych. It's kind of messed up, but it's like it really does depend who you are. I think, yeah, if you're like this highly valued man in society, you could kind of probably get away with more. Same with like a hot chick, but
Or if you're
they
charismatic.
got some
If
random
you're
nerd dude who
charismatic.
gets no girls, just like, you look ugly in that dress, and he's like, oh, he's like, wait, I pay $200 a month for like a Patreon account to learn this stuff. How come it's not working?
Yeah, that's how they get really mad. You go back to the leader and you go, it didn't work, and now you must pay.
I used to love the Ty Lopez videos because I felt like it went like this.
He's
He's
the
like,
best.
he would have like a camera. This is like OG internet. He'd be like, hey, oh, that Lamborghini right there. He's like, oh, you're poor. He's like, oh, that sucks. He's like, you don't want to be poor, right? You want a Lamborghini? Oh, is that a hot chick? He's like, oh, you want hot chicks? He's like, pay me. He's like, I get all this
Yeah.
stuff because I'm rich because I take your money. And it's like this whole thing where like you give Ty Lopez money to hang out with chicks and read books, but then like that's
He
kind
was
of
the
part of it.
original. Yeah, he was the original. I read 1,000 books a day.
Right. I'm like, how do you have time to read 1,000 books? You got 1,000 cars, but it was good marketing. I just felt like a lot of his scheme was getting people's money. So it's like, give me your money so I could buy another car and make another one of these ads. And people are like, okay, I mean, I want a car. I had a friend, I used to play soccer in LA, and he was, I want to say Central American, but like, spoke broken English, cool guy. His name was Jaime. He told me one time when I told him what I did, and, it's going fairly well, I would say, but he looks at me and he says, he's like, do you ever think about just talking about cars, like something that people actually want to listen to? And I was like, damn, but in his head, he's like, none of what you're doing matters to me. He didn't even realize it was going well, but he's like, if you're not doing well, just talk about cars. So I guess,
Yeah.
a car ad really does sell a lot of like, men like cars, men like women. So I guess the target audience is massive.
I feel like 100%, but I feel like one of the problems with those guys is like if you break it down, his initial message was probably contagious because there's something about it that is actually helpful with all of those people. But most of those guys that their whole thing is like get your life in order, it's like they have about, you know, a book's worth of information that you go, oh yeah, that made a good point or whatever. But then after that, there's like, and also this, they kind of like, you're like, you basically develop this like philosophy and then you sold it to me. And then I'm like, all right, I got it. You know
Right.
what I mean? Okay, I'll take, you know, there's probably something but the sort of they're, I feel like they're not sustainable long term because once you like internalize their, you know, what it like the tidbit of information that's actually like helpful in your life, then what else do they have to offer?
Right. Well, with him, you don't really see him around much, which I don't blame him. Maybe he made his money, he's out. But I think
I
that's
think so.
authenticity goes a long way. So someone like Tony Robbins, right? He's been around for 30 years because he's also doing motivational speeches. He's got his like tour that people want to go to. Where like Ty, it was like he just mastered the art of the YouTube ad. I'm sure he did other stuff too, but certain things last, I think, a long term in comedy and music and in like, personal self-help if it's real and not time tells all, I think. Same with like comedians. Can you be funny for 20 years or did you get lucky on a show? You know?
Yeah, and there is a bit of that for everyone, but I feel like the self-help stuff even more so. But I like Tim Ferriss, I was like, when it first came out, it was like you changed the game, but then that's your information sort of enters collective consciousness, right? So I think the difference in like art and entertainment. So once you have this sort of like game changing like philosophy, every other person starts to sort of think it. And then that becomes like sort of the zeitgeist. And then, but if it was great, then what? Are you going to say, oh, I have a new philosophy? Whereas if you're doing a new type of comedy, I feel like once the zeitgeist, I mean, that happens with probably you. I mean, you're like a person that influences culture, like everyone who's speaking and stuff like that. So, I mean, I've had videos where you kind of coin something that everyone else does, the thing that you're doing almost becomes like lame, 2 years later, and then you need to switch. And then because you'll be doing something and someone's like, oh, you're just doing that thing that everyone does. And you're like, well, I did it first. And then sometimes you'll be doing that to other people, right?
I think that's the benefit of comedy and like real life stuff is there's always different things changing. Like you have a lot to talk about if you can adapt to the world. But with self-help, I think a lot of it comes from ancient principles like Bible, Taoism, like ancient philosophy. So, they're kind of just repackaging old stuff and making it for the new world. Because once I read Eckhart Tolle's
Yeah,
Power of Now, I love the Power of Now. But then I read the Tao Te Ching and I'm like, oh, that's probably what inspired that book. And that book's thousands of years old. So it's like, you're kind
that's
of
like
saving
Peterson
comedy and
was
music.
young. Yeah, a lot of those guys eventually were just like essentially giving you stoicism tidbits, or kind of Jordan Peterson with Young to some degree. Yeah, there. I was, kind of what I was thinking is, so that is one of the things that one of the reasons why I don't like a lot of political commentators or whatever, and this is why I think I like artists better. Period. Is in if you look at whether or not, I know you're like Christian, but regardless of whether you're religious or not, it is the best scam in the world to open up a place and you just read someone else's book over and over again, right? And whether you believe the book or not, you're just paying someone to essentially like read a book. Like your whole business model is based on selling something that you didn't even make, right? So it really is like the perfect scam. And I think so you essentially, that gospel, and those universal truths take forever to kind of exist. And I think that sometimes political, I don't know, if, like activists or whatever, or even like what's DeSantis? What he's like a
Governor, politician.
politician.
Yeah.
But like politicians, the best. I was just saying a lot of politicians, especially why they bother me. It's like, they don't, all they do is just wait for the gospel to exist and then read it back to people that already think it, and it's like, I feel like there is a skill and art to do that, but I don't have like a respect for that craft, I think.
Well, think about authenticity too. So for like, say a politician, Trump changed the game in modern history because he was so funny, right? Like when he was funny and his jokes hit, it was like comedian level funny. So he brought a sense of authenticity at first to a
He
world
sort of
that
did
just
change the gospel. So I guess some people can sort of,
well,
also influence the
that's what I'm
gospel,
saying
but
with pastors
a
too.
lot of
There's
them
there's a
don't.
lot of there's a lot of lames, there's a lot of fakes, there's a lot of people just kind of grinding, and then it's it is interesting though where how do you make that new, or I guess how do you be authentic? But that's my thought is like authenticity goes a long way in comedy. I would say the equivalent would be someone who just like gets a position on something that's like, I mean, I'm not going to say SNL, but something that's really not that funny anymore, but they're just kind of there, and they're, their name's solidified like, oh, they belong here. But most people watch them and they're like, well, they don't really have what these other comedians have. That's why I feel like you, Tim Dillon, are killing it too, because now with the internet, you have competition, right? So everybody's competing against everyone else, and in a free market, even though it's not super free, it's like, is it funny or is it not? If it's funny, it's going to fly. If it's not, people will surpass you. So that's been a big, I think, shift for a lot of these mainstream people. Is like some of them are funny enough and they can compete in the digital era, and some of them really can't, and it bothers them.
Well, that's what happens when, I mean, when they start making the wrong picks, right? Like, I think you can only make the wrong picks for so long, and it's harder to justify the wrong picks. Not that they're not, that there isn't like still good shows or whatever at all, but yeah, in stand up comedy specific. Actually, you mentioned Tim. He had the best point. We were hanging out. He was like, we were in Nashville, and he was like, people will say like, oh, the people that are kind of doing industry stuff are not in the industry. And it was like, no, we're in the industry. You're not in the industry. You have a corporate job. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
you wake up at like 9 a.m. to go like Midtown to like write jokes for someone else to like get paid by Viacom or whatever. Like you're kind of not in the industry. The people, you know, in the comedy clubs and making comedy and making videos every day and collaborating with all these people and podcasting, like, no, we're in the industry and sort of creating the industry. So I don't know. It's a kind of just a shift of how you look at it. That's one of the reasons why that SNL thing, people always, it's this cardinal debate of like, is it funny? Even just like, it's kind of like this reference point. But to me, I'm just like, well, why are we always even like having that conversation? Like,
Right.
because we're still, even just having that conversation, you're still in your mind, like, yeah, but that's above us in some way. You know what I mean? But if you just shift it in your brain, it's just like, yeah, they're just doing some other thing. What do I care?
No, it's not. It's definitely not that popular, and the shift is happening. What you're talking about with political commentators too, like when people are being phony at work, they always call it, oh, it's just politics. Say you get screwed out of a raise, like, oh, that's just the work politics. So politics, I mean, it's almost like a synonym for fake. Like faking, like conniving. It's kind of what it means. So in
That's
politics,
true.
you have a bunch of people. They're like professional connivers. That's kind of like the business. So there's not a lot of, even in the Democrat or Republican Party, the people that really rise the ranks, they're sticking to the script, they're saying the things that people want to hear. So it's not, by nature, it's not a very creative industry, and the higher to the top you get, the more lobbyist money there is, et cetera. So it breeds fakeness where
Yeah.
with my type of stuff too, I've been a lot funnier over the last year because things are just crazy. So I see some political commentators, they're always like angry all the time, and I'm just thinking to myself, it's the same story every day. How are you gonna be mad every day? It's better to just make fun of it. Like all the craziness of the left, it could either be like a tragedy or a comedy. So as much as it annoys me, I tend to gravitate away from political commentators who are too angry and mad. I think there's a lot of value in comedy and humor and laughing and also being educated. But if you're not intellectually challenging my thoughts, you're just saying the same script and you're not funny, I'm probably not listening to you. I like people that are funny or providing something new, which is not a lot of people, but it's a blessing because that separates the cream from the crop, I think.
Well, I think you actually articulated what I was trying to say better. It's not that I think that they're bad at it. It's that I do think by design it's that. Certain like systems or jobs are just designed for a certain type of person. You know what I mean? The same way that, like the person who's going to be a CEO or versus the person who's going to be like a computer programmer it's going to design, people's going to design around that. So yeah, it's designed to be like, partisan, angry, and read gospel that exists back to people. Whereas in this one, and you do other stuff too, like you're an artist, and there's this other component where, sure, like people, there's the other part, like story structure, making videos, being funny, like none of that stuff obviously you want to capture it around energy, both comedic energy and like cultural energy and all that stuff. You want to sort of pay attention to and have opinions on and find out where you think the majority of people are wrong, and then you can kind of be part of an energy against that or whatever, right? All that stuff. But like by design, I feel like there's so many more parts that aren't just influenced by, hey, the goal here is to just kind of like read the book back to people.
Well, now with social media too, everything's kind of coming together where I started rapping, I would say in 2008, and I had label deals in like 2009. So that's, geez, I feel old now, 12, 13 years ago. When I went to the labels, I was an internet rapper and internet wasn't cool then. They looked at me like, I don't think he can make it in the big market because he just raps on YouTube. Now YouTube is kind of taken over. It's such this big thing, but it wasn't at the beginning. So I'm starting to see that now where if you're a rapper, but people don't like you as a person or personality wise, you're not doing well. People who are doing interviews really funny, they're getting more popular. So it's almost like you have to be your more, and I like this better. You can't hide too much like you used to behind PR teams. I guess the big pop stars can, but it's almost like I see signed rappers that have huge streams, but no one really cares about their brand because it's stale. They're rapping about what people rapped about. You almost, if you want to be relevant in today's world as a hip hop artist, anybody, you almost have to be like culturally relevant. And I think where me and you are winning and a lot of people are losing is they're not being themselves and they're just trying to do the safe thing. Like, let me put this in my profile picture. That's activism, but it's like corny and played out at this point. So the real people that are, I think, taking advantage of like the, fact that everybody doesn't know where to stand. Like you almost have to have a message. People want to see who you are. It's like, and I like that. I like interviews. I like that stuff. And, you almost have to do comedy or you got to
Isn't it
provide
the
something.
same thing as, do you remember when, probably even like the pre-era, right? There'd be these bands or, rappers or whatever that weren't very popular, but they would make like radio hits, like, you know what I mean? And you go, no, like no one gets popular making that shit. Like you make the shit that you think is like good and gonna change the game. It's like, yeah, a lot of times then those bands end up making slop for the radio, but like they're trying to skip a step. So they would be all these people that kind of hear what's on the radio and be like, oh, I'll make that. And it's kind of like these people that are, just kind of starting out or whatever. You go, oh, they look at Hollywood and they go, oh, I'll make that. And it was like, well, no, that's the like after you kind of get eat up and turned out by the machine, you might now make that. But it's like no one's creating energy by making the slop.
Right. Good point. I like Maroon 5. Their first album was amazing. They played instruments. I always laugh about that.
You're
It's
big
called Songs
Maroon
About
5
Change.
then?
Yeah. So, well, after the first album, because they were like an actual band. And then I feel like they were like, let's put Adam Levine forward and like, let's take out you guys.
Get his shirt
like,
off.
An EDM, take his shirt off, get an EDM beat. It's like, and like they just, but if someone would have came out with that, people would have thought it was corny. It is true, right?
Never,
you
exactly.
get in the game with like a real song versus like you can't come out the gate with like the broken down like recycled pop hit.
Well, you're gonna do it worse. I used to make a lot of music videos, and it'd be kind of like a lot of these big mainstream stuff. You'd always want to make like the big party video, right? But the big party video is $100,000 and people are jumping, there's a 1,000 extras and it's a mansion and people are jumping off the roof into pools and you have, wild stuff. So when you're the young band with like no money and you're like, hey, let's make the party. She was like, what, you'll make a crappy version of that? It's like, who are you speaking to?
Right.
The people that like party videos? Well, they'll like the better ones. So It's like, if you're going to try to make the same music as these huge, artists, but like they have all the, first of all, that slop needs to be jammed down your throat and you don't have the machine to jam it down people's throat.
Right. Well, that's the difference. It's like having, as they say on the streets, like having the sauce, like you either got it or you don't. So there's some people that are always chasing a wave. Like either you make the wave or you chase the wave. If you're chasing the wave, you might get lucky, but it's not a long-term solution. If you know how to create the wave, it's like comedy. Someone can maybe like copy someone else and capitalize off something funny one time. But if they're not truly that funny themselves, in 5 years, you're going to figure it out. So I think, that translates to every genre. It's like either you got it or you don't. And a lot of people are just imitating and copying and trying to like copy paste certain things, but the greats in every genre are not doing that.
Yeah, and that's why there is a place for the other people. If you're the person that's not that, like, maybe you're not, the one part, like you're not some like trailblazer or whatever, but you are, super funny and you don't have the temperament for people being mad at you, or you don't have the temperament for, doing something that isn't already been accepted. I think then you just realize it about yourself. And maybe a lot of those people, if they are talented, but just not that, there probably is a lot of those people that are very funny writers or whatever, right? Like there's probably a lot of people that write on television shows that are super funny, but had it be them in charge, it would suck.
And in order, say for my content, like I know I edit it. You've put out consistently skits every week, and they're always funny. A lot of people can't do that. I mean, either they don't have the production quality or the ambition or the talent or the creativity to do that. But I think what if you're a hip hop artist, the ones that aren't going to fade away, they mix their own songs, they master them. It's all in house. So it's not
Especially
like
now, yeah.
it's not this big machine. So I know I can't speak for you, but I want to actually hear about your journey, but also now like you stay really consistent. I stay consistent. I have a good work ethic. Like, how do you do it? Why do you do it? Because a lot of comedians, they either can't or they don't. And I've noticed that you have a great work ethic, and not just a great work ethic, but you are able to consistently be extremely funny and drop like super hit videos like every month.
Do you know what's funny? I'll comment on that, but just like in relation to it, the thing that does make me laugh, because you just said to me before the show, you're like, "Oh, I saw these videos when you had long hair. Like, I didn't realize you've been doing this for like a really long time, right?" And it makes me laugh because I'll get people that, especially in America, people have known about me for a year or 2 years or whatever. So a lot of times people will message, be like, "Oh, I liked Ryan before. I think he's not getting fun," whatever, right?
Like last year,
Yeah, yeah.
2021 around was better. Yeah.
But you will, and you go, okay, so I've been doing this for 20 years now. So I've been making videos for, probably about 20 years, maybe even a little longer, really. I've been making since I was like very young. So I've been doing this, almost every day for 20 years. And you go, so you found me at year 19 and at year 20, like what a cool, like you found me. And then 6 months later was like, I'm just not funny anymore for whatever reason. And like, so it's just so funny. Like, yeah, there is, like, everyone goes through like peaks and waves. You're not like, if you made video that you're like, fuck, this is the funniest thing I made in the last few months, then next month might be a worse month. Like you go peaks and valleys. But in terms of how I try to think of it is, over the years, I've sort of developed, like, at least my philosophy is the biggest part is set what you're going, the amount that you're going to do and stick to it. And I don't always do it. Sometimes I'll find myself doing more, but you go, set your like boundaries. So if I go, okay, I write this many days a week, I do stand up this many days a week, I toured this many days a month, I make this many videos a week, which is like, every Monday and every second Wednesday. This is the podcast. I do it once a week. And you sort of you're like, these are the 7 things that I have to do. And then there's 2 things that happen. One is that you are able to like keep reminding yourself like what the focus is. So you stay like, you can kind of stay focused. And then 2, it also has an end to it because social media can just be like a never ending thing. And I think that idea of it's never done also just makes you worse too. So you go, so like there is a point where you go, hey, if I wanted to, I actually can do all of my stuff. So the next 2 weeks I can focus on some other project or whatever. So I think the biggest thing is like having the amount that you do so you can wrap your brain around it. And then you go, even if everything else is falling apart, you've like done those things. So then you never really feel like you're just completely, your life's like falling apart. So that's
Right.
at least running a social media business. I feel like that's a huge thing.
So you've been doing it for 20 years too, where I mean,
Well, I mean, not like professionally. Like, I mean, I've been making videos since I was a kid.
working at it, doing videos,
Yeah.
being, like trying hard. Where I think those 2 things, you put those together. Obviously, like talent is one, but a lot of people like, you're saying, oh, you were good a year ago. You're like, you don't even know my whole journey. You just found
Not
me
at
and got
all.
upset at like one video, but they don't see that process, like the root in the ground where it's like 19 years before that. And that does like, even for me, I watched videos of myself 2 years ago. I don't think I was ever bad. I was getting maybe even more views back then, but I had like no worse personality, or I was uncomfortable in front of I just see the progression in myself where I'm like, oh, okay, I've gotten a lot better even over the last year or 2. And there's really only one way to do that in comedy or anything is to stay at it. So you have 20 years of working And then what you said, I think, was key for anybody, where it's a lot of people miss the execution stage of it. Just do it. So your way of executing was like, I'm going to do this every Monday, a video every week. And then you stuck to it, and then took probably talent. I've seen a video of you years ago, super funny. I feel like you looked super seasoned then, like wasn't missing a step. But you took that energy and that talent and been like, okay, now I'm going to put it out to the world consistently and just keep hitting. And eventually I'm sure like one hit, and now you just keep driving home. And probably after working so long, I'm guessing like, you don't want to squander it. And you're not like, it's still fun for you, right? After working 19 years towards something and having it really hit a big stage, you seem like you're more focused now than ever.
To be honest, I think videos is like the most thing that I like doing. And as I've gotten bigger, like now I got a couple of like full-time employees. And one thing that I was even realizing recently, where I was like, cause I was doing all this like kind of business stuff, and I've been training people to be good at editing and stuff like that. And, it's very, very hard to find someone that's like a really talented like editor in the way that I wanted to. I've been spending a lot of time trying to get that system, but then I sort of removed myself from like the parts that I liked for too much. And it was like, I kind of realized I wasn't having as much of a good time. And I was like, because I hired people to do all the stuff that I like, I'm just doing all the stuff I don't like.
It's tough though when you want to be consistent, to scale it out. You got your brain going in so many directions. You got to figure out what someone else can do with what you're doing. I just realized I forgot to talk about the title, so I wanted to do it real quick. Is Elon Musk, he did some Twitter poll. I guess before that, with the filings, he had taken 9.2 or something stake in Twitter. People don't think it's a free speech platform. Now he's on the board today. Do you think he'll make it better? Do you think he'll bring people back like Trump, or what do you think?
That is the question, right? I think that I generally think I like Elon Musk, and I know people that kind of know him, and they all are pretty positive that he's just kind of like a weird, quirky, like somewhat like autistic sort of dude that seems to believe what he believes. And I think that I do like the idea that there's these kind of, I mean, it is almost like the romantic idea of this super rich dude that's just like, what if I just went and bought Twitter? You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that stuff is cool, but whether or not it will make a huge dent, that's something that a lot of these people, it's interesting to see, you hear Mike Zuckerberg talk on podcasts, and at his core, he like to some degree is like a freedom, a speech freedom guy. And if you hear Jack Dorsey, now that he's done Twitter, I think he just didn't like Trump, and they had like almost like a personal beef. Like now he's sort of outside of Twitter saying that, decentralization is the future. And I kind of regret some of my, what I did at Twitter. And so it is an interesting thing that there is these, there's this idea that, big tech is this anti-free speech place. But if you actually boil it down, like a lot of these CEOs are all pretty openly not that. It's just, you kind of have a weird situation where the government's very intertwined with them, and they have to go to the essentially Congress or whatever once every 3 weeks and get yelled at by the right and the left, and they just get yelled at by everyone. So it's, to be honest, I don't know the extent to which they're able to, so it'd be interesting.
At what point? Yeah. What do you think it's like Frankenstein almost too, where like if you're left wing, it's just like safe, especially if you're like Zuckerberg or something, you kind of just side with like the Democrats and kind of just play along. But at a certain point, the beast kind of swallows you alive, like Jack Dorsey. At a certain point, if you aren't trying to go the full distance of censorship, they get on you, and they're always pressuring people. So I wonder at what point like people have lost control of their own companies, and it's almost like there would be a mutiny if they really went full free speech, because now people are so unhinged and going further and further towards authoritarian. I ask myself that with Elon, it seems like, I know once again, some people are very skeptical. Obviously, he's a billionaire, microchip in people's brains and stuff, but he seems super funny. And like he goes on Babylon Bee, super authentic. He explains how he feels, even if you don't agree with it. I definitely like him more than any billionaire. And I definitely like him more than most politicians. Will he lead us to the right path of freedom? I mean, I'm not putting my full stake in it, but I genuinely think that, he's just like a wild guy. Like, here's a Twitter poll. I'm going to do it. Like, how much of it has been thought about before? I don't know. It definitely seems pretty spontaneous. It's super cool. He's always just like, okay, you vote this. Should I sell my stock or not? and then people voted yes, and then he sold all his stock. Like he'll just do a Twitter poll and say, if you pick this, I'm doing it with billions of dollars. Like it's like crap.
Yeah, and he does put
Yeah.
his money where, even where he kind of said to people, they're like, hey, this much money could save the world. And he sort of says, all right, well, give me a plan of how that could stop hunger and I'll spend the money. But, it sort of forces people to, live in the world of like realism and not rhetoric a little bit when you kind of, have that much money, you put it where it is. But, on the other side of it, it's like, people don't really want free speech. And that's, I think people like you do. And I think a lot of people that, speak for a living do, but I think that it's almost in a weird space where, I think the liberals, I think what people like in America is partisan politics. And I think that right now the free speech, that's like a talking point of the right, but you can see the authoritarianism creep in on all the influential conservatives where it's like, they would just as soon be banning, speech that they don't like, in my opinion, and they have in the past.
Do you think that's dangerous though? I know you're from Canada, but like especially here, I've noticed over the last 5 or 6 years, the slippery slope to me, like once you lose the First Amendment, a lot of patriots, conservatives, libertarians are like, yo, that's the cornerstone of our democracy, republic. And as soon as it went, I mean, it only took 3 years for it to be Alex Jones being banned, the president being banned, millions of people being banned, lockdowns, forced masking. I personally, without being like conspiratorial, I don't think that's random. I really do think it's the cornerstone of if you're going to have a society where you can criticize the government and talk about big billionaires and freely, have these discussions, you have like protection from, a total societal authoritarian like collapse on you. And I think that's all similar. So as much as you think people want it here, do you think it's dangerous or do you think it'll switch around or do you think that?
Yeah, I think you're right. That I think that's the reason is that it has to be embedded and not, a constant choice, right? And this is the whole problem at Twitter. It's like, or Facebook, any of these places. I mean, if what you're allowed to say has to be a daily discussion, it's always going to be safer than sorry for, every company or every establishment. I mean, people don't want to have these conversations really. Right. So that's why it's, probably America's designed where it's like, no, this is like embedded in the thing. And obviously it got complicated where, Elon Musk is saying Twitter's the town square and people that want freedom of speech say, no, it's a private company. I think I agree with the first one where these are like somewhat of town squares. But if Elon Musk was really serious about this, day one, Alex Jones is back on Twitter. That would be, if he wants to put his money where his mouth is,
Right.
like, I
And
feel like
Trump.
we could have Trump too. We could have all these conversations forever, but really what would be, everyone with a
Right.
lifetime ban's no longer banned. That would be, and then I'll be like, all right, this guy means business. Until then,
But and I agree, but think about this with like jail. Like you could do something crazy and get out of jail in 10 years. I'm not suggesting. I'm just saying people have gotten out of prison for crazy stuff. People like Owen Benjamin, Alex Jones, I'm trying to think of others. Like they've been like permanently blacklisted on certain things where it's like, what is this? This is new stuff to humanity. So like, this is
I've said that. I've been talking about
this is a lifetime sentence when you could literally like kill somebody and get a more, less strict penalty. Then also what really bothers me, because if there was like a common sense, I still believe in free speech, but if it had somewhat of logic to it and we were talking about it, I could see where like, okay, we don't want maybe like pornography here. We don't want this. I understand that type of censorship, but what they're doing now, even on TuneCore, which I used to upload songs, it's called hate. They have a hate speech policy in music. Think about Eminem, rap songs. You say whatever you want in music. It's never been a problem, but now they have a hate speech policy all over. What is
so you can't rap about, I want to kill this guy and stuff like that?
No, you can. They don't care. Oh, they love that stuff. They don't,
so you can't care about
like
that.
anything
like,
degenerate is fine. But like, I have a new song coming out called "Ukraine Flag in the Bio." Maybe that's hate speech, even though I don't curse. Like Bryson Gray, that was hate speech. He did a safe space song. He went in on LGBT, right wing stuff. That's what they're looking to censor. If Eminem,
but you can say that I'm gonna come kill you,
right? They don't. I mean, there's millions of rap songs that I'm not being ignorant because I like rap. I'm a rapper, but like there are literally degenerate songs that are literally like I'll kill someone's grandma or like I'll take your shoes and like do like for no reason whatsoever. That's all fine as long as it's not like a political or social. So what they're doing with the hate speech thing, it's not like, oh, they really hate speech. It's like they're using that. Some people hate the truth. Some people hate reality. We've never had a conversation like as a society and been like, this is what is really hate, like violent speech, death threats. Like I get that might be hate speech, but no, they hate everything. That gender talk. You can't even make a gender joke. I like with long hair, you could say you look like a girl. Like now, I mean, that could be hate speech. You know what I'm saying? Because one, maybe I could just lie and be like, oh, I'm a transgender, and since I say that, now that's hate speech. Like these.
Well, I want to say that like
yeah.
this is why like I almost wish it was like, in my opinion, as simple as if you make fun of like left wing their special interest groups, you get kicked off. But I probably get 50% because of that stuff and 50% because of sex stuff. So like a lot of the stuff that I get removed is sexual in nature, which
Gotcha.
why can't you say that as well? But it's not like I would say on TikTok, for example, I actually get my stuff removed way more for, talking about sex or whatever. So it's not,
I
it's
got you.
not, it's not for, at least from my experience, most of my videos, they get demonetized. Like 50% of that is from, whatever, talking about butt sex or whatever. Right.
Got
So
you.
I wish it was like as simple as like, hey, this is straight up like one political party likes speech and the other doesn't. But like, why would, if anything, you think that probably liberals would care less about me talking about sex than conservatives?
Right. They have. So you're saying they have, because a lot of people that only talk about politics, they don't see that because it's you don't really talk to people that are interested in other genres, but they do also censor like a lot of stuff. Like so it's almost like they started with this person, and that web has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So it's
And
like
nudity, you can agree. Like nudity, like I understand that. Again, I'm like not for taking people off the platform, but I understand that there is a difference between speech and like what you said, nudity. Like if
right,
some place said like, hey, you can't have sex on my platform, like I get that that's not like protected by speech laws, but
right.
I haven't been doing that. I'm
You're making
talking about,
jokes. Yeah,
I'm making jokes about sex. So to
but
me, like I get 50, half and half of all
right.
those. So it's like a little more deep than just, and whatever. I think the conservative argument would be like, whatever, we should be allowed to be on YouTube without maybe hearing some guy talk about having sex in a graphic way. And maybe the liberal argument is I should be able to be on social media without hearing anything bad about
Right.
anyone ever, except for
Well, I think
fucking
you're right that a lot
Trump.
of conservatives, even historically, have censored and wanted certain things off. And I think now, what your perspective is important because this is my point that I'm always making all the time. I don't think the people running the show have it all figured out and they have this grandiose plan. On one hand, I think they know what they're doing, but I think it's backfiring on them and it's going to backfire on everybody. So I think it's going to be a disaster for everyone involved. So when you start censoring speech, they've only grown it. They haven't shrunk it. There's been nobody brought back because it's like it's just growing, growing, growing. So what you're saying is important because I think a lot of Republicans and conservatives will assume, well, I'm the only one getting censored. And it's like, actually, there are left wingers getting censored too. Probably not as much for their political views, but this idea of
Well,
what is
sort
censorable has
of.
just grown to the point where it's
I
like
think that
on TikTok, I get kicked off all the time for anything big pharma. And you know me, I don't just say crazy stuff. I have mainstream stuff, Fauci clips.
yeah.
Anytime I talk about big pharma, it's banned. So like they're banning sexual stuff, they're banning big pharma stuff. They're banning some women for twerking. They're saying their butts are showing too much. I know chicks that are being banned for that. So there is a huge spectrum for sure.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. Like the truth is, like, people call it like conservative ink or whatever. It's like, and this is kind of where I think I care less about the thing and more about the art. Like, I am laser focused on comedy. And at the end of the day, like as much as I want to pretend that like or not, I don't even think I want to pretend, but like I could pretend if I felt like it that, I'm trying to make the world a better place. Like I'm most focused on like, did this joke work at the Comedy Cellar tonight? You know what I mean? So when I see what I observe as like a cultural observer with, let's say I'm not trying to make things better, I observe like, free speech, like anything else, has become like a grievance for conservative commentators to leech onto to sell whatever they want to sell. And the truth is, like, if you talk about like people like, let's say the Dave Rubins of the world or Daily Wire, like the truth is like those people aren't being like they're not getting kicked off YouTube. Like they have partner managers. Like the truth is
Right.
like those people aren't having their PayPal services removed. Like the odd time, like someone probably big, like probably the biggest conservatives that do maybe is like a Steven Crowder does like kind of wild stunts and that'll happen to him. But for the most part, like some of those like really mainstream people, like that's not going to happen to them. Whereas those left-wing people, like, dude, I know all my friends are like left-wing podcasters. They're all, you know, they're banned from every platform, or, you know, all those left-wing like streamer dudes that say wild shit. You know what I mean? Those
Right.
guys
So
are all banned from all sorts of things.
a lot of the big conservatives, like you said, conservative Inc., they're kind of like grandfathered in. Like they could probably get meetings with Facebook, and they have it pretty
Dude,
much
they're not,
solidified. Where
yeah, they're
they're
making
the
these
safe
crazy
ones.
ad
You see their
spends.
you see their ads and stuff. It's like they want conservatives to go there, and that's another thing because I talk about all the time how Republicans are
They're
passing
not getting censored.
right, and Republicans pass speech laws as well. I talk about it a lot. Trump and DeSantis. It's like for Israel and like Jewish speech laws. And it's annoying because it's just like you read these words and then they turn into leftists and they call you an anti-Semite, like a left would call you a racist. And it's like, I'm not a racist if I want to hear Ryan tell a joke, and I'm not an anti-Semite if I want to hear someone's perspective on a college campus. I think like outside of what you're saying, if they start censoring more and more and more, like the top establishment will not get censored, but the average person, they almost move the Overton window left because they're pulling out some ideas that would normally be funny or interesting and pushing it away. But I like your attitude as well, because for me,
It's
I've
an
definitely
establishment. You hit the nail on the head. It's establishment versus, dissonance, right?
but I like your attitude too, because even you're saying, people from the left that have been banned, but your focus, like for me, I've been demonetized. I mean, they've taken stuff away, but I'm always trying to adapt and evolve where my thought process is it's not going to stop my hustle. There's always a way to use, like, say if you get banned or stuff, then people are willing to rally behind you. So a negative can turn to a positive too, if you can figure out how to utilize it. And that's kind of my attitude as well, where I really don't like the right wingers though that talk free speech, free speech, free speech, and then they actually don't support it. That's the craziest part, where it's like a lot of those big establishments, they're hitting with big tech, so they're not getting censored. They start social media platforms that have speech laws in it themselves, and they're not truly free speech platforms. And then they support laws that right wingers pass that are actually uh, blurring the lines of reality with free speech as well. So I think because you're not super politically, you're not really picking a side.
I
You
don't
see
buy
through
it. It really is like, it's like everyone's trying to sell you something, right? So it's like, I don't want to say that all the like narratives are corrupted. It's that, but like to some degree, it's all like so corrupted. It's like impossible to find a position that hasn't been corrupted. So, I moved here to make, videos. And I think that I try not to pretend that I'm like more important than I am in some
But
ways.
I think the fact that you're so focused has made a difference, because why I like you is not just because you're funny, but you make fun of the left really well, which people are afraid to do a lot. And you also make fun of the right in like the perfect way. You know what I'm saying? And as someone that sees the BS in both sides, I love that without trying too hard or trying to be political, you're actually doing a better job than most political analysts, because you're seeing it from the outside and just laughing
Well,
at the
most
absurdity
political,
of it.
and again, I would say that back at you too. I think that's why I like your stuff. But I also think that that's like, they're not political analysts. They're like partisan salesmen.
Right, like
You know what I mean?
sports team like fanatics, where it's just like, and then
Yeah.
it's just funny because those people end up being the exact same person they hate. Like I watch when I say something like, I haven't tweeted about Trump in months, but I did over the last couple of days. I can't remember what I said, but it was pretty like simple, and I started getting like the left. If you talk about big pharma, they'll say you're an anti-vaxxer because they have these words that don't really mean that much, and they're like, "That's you." Then these
Yeah.
right wingers are calling me anti-Trumper, and it's like anti-vaxxer. I'm not an anti-Trumper. I voted for him. I've gone to the White House and visited. Like, I'm not anti. That's just a word to just say like, don't talk about this. They literally turn into the
Yeah,
left
yeah.
when you hit a
Don't
topic.
speak the Lord's name in vain. Well, they turned into the left, who turned into the right, who would probably turned into the left. Like this
Right.
happened. The cycles have gone over and over and over again. I've been alive long enough to see them, so I'm not gonna, try to like. I can't unsee that now. I had a theory that, two theories that I feel like you probably have like a good opinion on. So the first one is that, how like with all the normalizing stuff, right? Um, It's almost like where I was thinking about where the right's wrong and where the left's wrong in this conversation. And it's very like, hey, we need to like normalize these like alternative lifestyles. Like, let's say, you know, being like a uh polyamorous gay couple where you're like a 7-person couple, right? Or whatever, right? You know, and I think that the left is very like, there should be no normal things, you know. It's like, what is normal, right? Like everything's different, which therefore there's no normal. So they're wrong. They're like, is it normal? And most people would be better off probably doing the normal thing. Doesn't mean, and then the right sort of like I'll see, you know, how, like a lot of times there'll be Twitter pages on Twitter that just kind of post like wacky left wing people. Like they'll be like, hey, look at this. Like this is a person that's going to be like a teacher or whatever. And sometimes it'll be like, hey, I'm trying to tune your kid's gay. And it'll be like a pretty wild thing. Right. But sometimes it'll just be like a person that's weird. It'll be like someone that like that, like, hey, but it's not saying like you should do it. Like to me, I do make fun of people when they like it's shoved down your throat. But when it's like their little culture, if someone wants to be a furry, it's still funny to make fun of. But like, but the attitude of like, can you believe this exists sort of thing? Like some people are better off living alternative lives. And I consider myself one of those. And it kind of reflects where, yeah, I agree. I disagree that there is this idea that, you know, people are better. A woman might be better off like being a mother or whatever, right? Or like you might be better off with a family. And that might be true like on aggregate, but it's also not true that there weren't like a million, you know, wine moms, you know, that were like really unhappy. They kind of left whatever they were going to do, started this family, didn't do anything they want to do, and lived most of their life extremely unhappy. And then, you know, pick the wrong guy, start doing pills. You know what I mean? So
true.
You know, and to me, I'm like, you know, you'll see people being like, oh, you know, you should have a family, this and that, and maybe I will, but like, there is like this idea that that's like the solution for all the problems. It's like, it's really negating that there's lots of people that do that and they're also unhappy. So it's like, everything can't just be like packaged so neatly. Like there is a normal, it's not for everywhere. And like life's more complicated than just like, it's almost like people want to be like, hey, life's easy. It's like figured out. Here's the path and you just do it. Like, I don't know.
Do you agree with this? Because this statement has stuck with me for a while. I don't remember when someone told me, but they said, because I've always been really open-minded, more liberal in the sense of like, I don't live a normal life. I always wanted to rap, do weird stuff. But they said, you know, be open-minded, but not so open your brain falls out. So for a while, you know, I feel like
I think that's good.
It's kind of like in Portland, Austin, a lot of these, and they're still cool in some areas, no doubt. But like, it's really great for the first 10 years. They got oat milk lattes, like garlic aioli sauce, like the hipsters like provide so much value. But then they just get so naive and foolish with how to run a city that it ends up like going backwards and backwards. And I feel like
because they no longer were like the outcast. They tried to make that the norm, right? Like again, they would be like, you're weird if you don't do this. And it's like they took something which should be like which is like to some degree a fringe culture, and then sort of acted like you're weird if you don't do it.
Right. And just drawing the line, like in your life, I'm guessing like you have
to be like me telling everyone like they're crazy for not being comedians. It's like, no, we're the weird ones, like that, and that's fine.
Right. But I guess you have to draw the line where it's like, okay, I got to at least get some sleep. I'm not saying I don't have sleepless nights, but it's like everybody has a line that they have to draw somewhere. Like you got to eat food and drink water. Like you're going to die. Like everyone has to do something. So I feel like that's what's happened in the last 5 or 10 years. And it's always a pendulum swinging, but I've seen from Christians being the ones that were censoring speech, trying to censor Eminem, to now like the left wing kind of leading the charge. And like you said, there's some right wingers too, but almost like they're so open-minded that like any basic
they just don't have the power. The right wingers just don't have the power. Like,
right. And you know any structure bothers them though. Like even like the smallest little structure that would have been considered left wing like 10 years ago, like it's a bother to certain people where they're like, I'm so open-minded that nothing is anything. Where it's like societally wise, it doesn't work. I want to ask you a question with because you came from Canada too, and you're super open-minded about this stuff. Like, as someone who's in America, you know, I've traveled a little bit. I've seen pros and cons, but one thing I am really grateful for in America is we do have this culture a little bit more rambunctious, pro-gun, pro-freedom of speech. Like it's definitely baked into our DNA and our culture here. Do you see that? Like I have a friend, I'm actually in this documentary coming out, and he lives in Canada, but he can't leave, you know, because he didn't get vaccinated. So it's like, you know, he's kind of stuck there. And it's happening in America too, no question. But where like, you know, Canada, Europe, I know they have a lot of pros over America, like their food quality in Europe, I think is better than here. But in general, like, do you see that where, you know, so many right wingers are so attached to that here because we feel like if we're going to lose that, we don't want to end up like Canada, and not saying it's all bad or anything, but we really value free speech. We really value the Second Amendment. And we don't see it as like, well, yeah, we know they're being naive. We know that it's going both ways, but we feel like if we lose these freedoms, that we are going to end up in like a perpetual lockdown or some sort of gulag. Like, do you see that? Or
Well, I think you have two cultures living in America at the same time, right? And that's it's like, it's almost like the culture comes first, but then it comes second. Like, I don't think you could take American ideals and just put them on China or Russia. I don't think people really want that, right? But in America, there is a lot of people that do want that. So in Canada, I mean, there's years and years of culture. I mean, they've never also been invaded. Like, they've never had America, or not that America's been invaded, but like they've never had to be like a world power. Like, there's no real like existential threat that people have felt in Canada in some degree, right? So I think that the like why is a culture the way it is? Like a million different factors, but in Canada, the people, that idea of, hey, what if your government like gets crazy or whatever, to them is just like, what are you even like talking about? Like, it's just this crazy idea, right? Whereas Americans, that's like a real thing that is, a belief that Americans have, right? So
well, it also manifested itself in reality
culture.
where, to me, 2020, regardless of what you think about its safety, et cetera, like that was the craziest government overreach of our lifetime, where they pretty much outlawed travel and stuff. So it's like, it's not like not even just an idea. Now that it's happened in reality, like, do you feel that more? I mean, definitely on the right.
Well, what my point is that, and which I took way too long to get to, there's like different countries that have different cultures. And for me, there's both. There's like, hey, if I go to Portland, I go, they would benefit from like some libertarian paradise. I go, I don't know. I think people would hate that there. And it's just like not how they're wired. Right. Whereas, other places in America, I think the answer to some degree is like, probably further state rights. But for me, obviously, I'm like an entrepreneurial person. I moved to America to like get away from that, to start my businesses, to be able to, like expand in a way, and like the whatever is still the like freest country in the world with the most like cultural significance, with that culture matters the most. Like, this is where and I think all that stuff comes from what you're saying. So for me, obviously, whether or not it's better for society, that's like where I want to live. And I do like the idea that like people do have the power to move. I think that needs to be normalized more, where it's like in America, it's like you literally have two different types of people. It's like, let people go to which states they want to, run those experiments and see how they work. I mean, I know everyone argues like they can't have, like, I actually am a proponent of like public health care, but people don't want it in those states. So it's like, I know California, they go, oh, we can't run it, but you have 33 million people. Like, that's how much Canada has, and they have healthcare. There's places with smaller populations. Like, you should be able to make that work with that state. And if they haven't kind of already. And so it's like, I really do think, let people move. And I know people are like, oh, I don't want to move. People can move. People have done it since the history of time. So let people go where they want to go. And I kind of argue this with the New York people the other way. It's like, when I live in New York, and there's a lot of people that, hate all this stuff. And it's like, you don't have to live here. It's like, especially when you don't have like a family or anything, it's like, dude, you can move. Like, why, why walk down the street and hate it? It's like, you can move. So I am I don't know if that's like a personal responsibility take or whatever, but like on both sides, they're like, let these experiments get run on the two sides of the country, and let, I think the federal level, they should stop intervening. But I guess that's where it breaks down, is the experiment from the left-wing states also involves like, hey, let's have this federal government like redistribute everyone's wealth. So it's like, it's hard for them, but it should be like, dude, you have a state with 35 million people. Like, you can run your own little country there.
Right.
However you want.
Well, that's the issue now, is even with like, in comedy, it used to be, and it's not that bad or anything, but it was like, okay, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. But the people, in my opinion, that, they want to just micromanage everything, that becomes a huge issue. Because even with the forced masking and the lockdowns and stuff, I agree with you. I don't really care. Like, I mean, there's hundreds of millions of people in this country. I'll probably see less than 1 million of them, maybe, so it's like, I don't really care what other people do. Like, they live here, there, but when they start infringing, and then like everybody kind of just starts following it, I think, your mindset plays into that though, where you're saying this is what people want, that both sides don't really want true free speech. And I think I try to not preach, but say that all the time, where it's like, in this country, you get what you want. And I think you came here with a good mindset as an entrepreneur. You focused on your craft. And that's the greatest thing you could really do in this country, is make the most of your life, move if you want to move, do the best you can do. And hearing stories from people who move here for that, a lot of people take it for granted, being in the cultural center of the Western world.
Yeah. And there's also, I will say that here's a point that I will say about New York is, a lot of times when I moved here, people would use Canada as an example of like a hellhole, right? Where they would be like, oh, public healthcare, what are we going to be like Canada? And I would kind of always be like, oh, like you guys think it's different than it is. Cause there'd be a lot of these things where I'd be like, it's not like bad like that. Like the way that it's being described by the media here or whatever, the people that don't like it. I'm like, it's not like Toronto's fine. Like it's a cool city. But when people were talking about the lockdowns and stuff like that, it kind of was like as bad as they say. Like, they did really like lock everyone in for 2.5 years. It was like crazy authoritarian. Like people's bars would open and then shut. Like they were messing with people almost, like to the point where it's like, yo, you can't mess with humans like that. They're gonna explode, right?
It's psychological abuse, right?
It's like real psychological abuse. But on the other side of that, I would hear that same thing about New York, and I'm just like, I mean, you like have to wear a mask on the subway, sort of. Like, do you know what I mean? So I would go back to Canada. I'm like, dude, people are losing their brains. Like everyone's depressed. It's really bad. But in New York, it was bad for whatever, like 7-8 months. But then I would hear on the news and it would be like these extreme lockdowns and it would kind of hear the propaganda to some degree about how bad it was. And I was like, I mean, I'm at like a nightclub right now. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And like, it wasn't as bad as people said here, but in Canada it was.
Right. Do you think, because this is my thoughts, like I've always been, I'm creative. I get along with liberals. I mean, I don't know who listens to my platform because I do dive into a lot of politics, but on a personal level, I can connect with someone. I'm not trying to like hate somebody if I just meet them. I'm trying to hear their story. Politically, if I'm at like a club or something, I don't really care. I'm there to have a good time. But in general, definitely, I've noticed the slippery slope that a lot of people on the right used to talk about. I used to think it was crazy because I'm like, you guys are overreacting when I was younger. But now I really see it where, like, in my opinion, the reason why it was so bad in Toronto is because the Overton window in Canada is more shifted left. They don't have that
you're probably right.
spirit culture.
Know, yeah.
So when enough people, even here, I think conservatives are too weak. I know millions of Trump supporters that just went along with stuff where I take such a hard line stance because, well, first of all, I mean, it's straight psychological abuse. If you're going to do that to people, at least have a little bit of compassion. Like I have a friend who lives in Toronto, and I feel terrible for them because I'm like, I'm hearing what they're doing, and I'm like, man, at least have a little empathy and be like, hey, I know this is tough for you guys to stay inside and not go in gyms, but it's like, they're just like, shut up and don't talk about this, or you're an anti-vaxxer, and somene's like, I'm fully vaccinated. It's like,
dude, can you imagine people that started, saved their entire life savings to start a business? The government like crushed it. Some of these businesses got loans, some of them had to pay it back. Like, and then, it's one thing to be like your average Joe Blow, you don't have to work and the government gives you money. Fine. Like everyone's essentially on welfare now, which like mentally still isn't good. And most people were depressed. But if you go, and then you go, okay, we're opening it back up half capacity, and you scrape enough money together where you go, okay, maybe if I can do this for 4 months, I'll lose $1,000 a month, but I could probably still keep the lights on. And then after 2 months of that, they go, actually, we're shutting this down again too. It's like legitimate, like mental torture that they're doing to these people. And and there was like, you're supposed to think that there was no cost, like there's no level where you would switch it. And so that's where I think you're right, that I do see it the other way around, where you kind of do say, yeah, there is a point where this is what happens. And it does just seem alarmist to always be like beating that drum, but like that is the like cost. But again, 50% of people in Canada, if you said this to them, they would still say like, yeah, it was great. If anything, like we're mad that they're opening things back up. Like people's brains are fried, dude.
Right. And that's why even as an American, like, okay, I moved to, I told you, Orange County. You were out. We went to the, your show was in Irvine.
Yeah, we were hanging.
And like when I have an Uber driver stuff where I don't, on a normal basis, I don't really, talk about politics much at all. I just enjoy my life and go about it. But when I hear somebody moves from like LA, I almost want to have that talk with them where it's like, I'm not a preachy person, but I'm like, you came to this county. It's cleaner. It's nicer. Everything about it is really, in my opinion, better. And it's because it's more right leaning and people value their community and they're not just total, like mindless people where they're running it into the ground. So even when like coming to America and stuff, it's like
But the
it's an amazing.
comedy's not better. The nightlife's not better. Like the restaurants necessarily aren't better. Like there is always
There's
a
definitely
tug and
better
pull.
food there, but when you have restrictions and if you're unvaccinated, I mean, a lot more places are treating you really horribly in Los Angeles, where it's like, I guess it's that type of lifestyle where if you want the clubs and the nightlife and the lockdowns and the forced vaccinations, stay in LA, don't come here. And it's kind of like that with America, I feel like, where like a lot of people come here and don't really, it's like, even just speaking to you, it is what it is. But when people come to America, it's like, you don't think twice. It's like there's a reason it's better than Toronto when it comes to that. Lockdowns are serious. It's human slavery and human rights abuse. I don't
Yeah.
think it's really beating a drum because the reason we're going more and more left is because people leave some place that has crazier rights. They come here and then they act like it's really not a thing. Where I agree with people like New York, LA. But when people come to OC, it's like if you want lockdowns and nightlife, stay in LA. But if you're gonna come and bring that culture here, you're gonna ruin it.
But couldn't we
And
now
people
say,
here don't.
I guess what I'm saying is like, and I know it's the government overreach too, but like, couldn't you now say that the other way around where like someone in New York, like okay, listen, the minute they locked down New York, I was here for maybe a month and then I moved to Miami. And I know it's easy to say like, okay, well, you have money or whatever, but like, you know what? When I was poor, I was doing wild moves like that as well. Like, you know what I mean? I came and moved to LA and slept on a couch and whatever. I'm not saying anyone has to do anything, but like you can figure it out. Like, you know what I mean? If you want
Right.
to move. So it's
And
like,
that's my question for you, because I don't know the answer to this, but if someone, okay, you're going to America from say like Toronto, and then you identify that it's less free, and then you're going to Florida, Miami, over New York, because is it your duty to
but New
understand
York's
why
still
you keep
better.
running away from the liberals, or is it just something that you're like, I see it from both sides? Because I agree with you as far as like music, nightlife, culture. I love going to festivals and stuff. I perform
Well,
at
I mean,
places.
for me,
Like,
it's this,
I have
it's
a
like,
big left wing audience with
right.
music because they're more interested in that type of stuff. But politically, like that's where I draw the hard line, where it's like I'm a super compassionate, thoughtful person, but these people are driving this country into the ground, these cities into the ground, and any country that they really have cultural dominance over more than America. Like if you
Yeah.
took away as much as I say there's problems on both sides, if you took away the Christian conservative, like, First Amendment, Second Amendment, drum beating conservatives out of this country, the whole country's going to shit. I believe. I don't think for a second that I think that's what's the glue that's keeping this country
Well, what do you think
alive.
it would
And
look like if you didn't have any liberals? I mean, I'll tell you what it would look like. You'd have more liberals soon
it
because
would be
the
like
truth
Christian
is,
Sharia law, right? No, I don't know. I don't know. It could,
I'll tell you
cleaner,
what would
nicer.
happen is you'd have more liberals because you always are going to have this like fight. So I think that it's like a fight that's happened in probably every civilization since history, right? Where you go, okay, the more it's like that thing where you have progress and progress comes with stratification in any family and any business. Just to bring it back to music, every band starts and they're all equally nothing, and then they get famous and one guy gets way more famous and that causes like strife in the band. And if that level of fame is like he's the biggest celebrity in the world and everyone knows his name, and the other three guys are like total nobodies and no one knows their name and they have way less money, like that's a problem. So I think you have that in the society too, right? Where the more success and money a society gets and the more that it's not that you don't at all work to like close that gap, you're gonna get more liberals, and then the more liberals get in control and take away freedoms, you're gonna get more conservatives.
Right. The pendulum definitely swings back. And I think, it's really people's own choices and destiny. Like when you have a population that feels a certain way, like say Germany, however that happened through social engineering or naturally, you get the results. And even in America right now, I think, the country is manifesting itself through how people feel, what's going on, what happened historically. Like, the story, I think, where you're talking about, say you have like, I've met Christian girls that their father was a pastor, but he went too hard. Now they're like crazy liberal because they're running in the other direction, So it's like, it's definitely a balance where you don't want to go too hard, but at the same time,
But see, this is where it's like you could go both one of these ways where you're like, I guess my point is that like, I don't always think that there is like a perfect answer as much as like this is like an ongoing struggle forever. It's kind of like a couple being like, oh yeah, we'll solve all these problems and everything will be perfect. And it like never is in any sort of relationship. There's always sort of work to be done. But yeah, I know what you mean though. Like what's that you're saying the cost of, liberals run amok essentially is a real one that you're not okay with and it's too high?
Well, just because it's turned like the Women's March and like Black Lives Matter protests, like it's whatever to me. But once you start, forcing masks on 2-year-olds and kicking people off planes and not allowing people to leave a country, I mean, in my opinion, it's a full blown like human slave scheme. It's no
Did you
longer
see Justin Trudeau getting you? I mean, you must have seen Justin
bro.
Trudeau
Yeah,
getting yelled at you.
I've seen a lot of his like it's wild where it's like it's not. I don't care about people's ideas, but I'm not a slave. Like I'll do this even in a conservative county because it's not just the left. Like a lot of the right, they just roll over and allow it or go along with it. But to me, it's like I don't play that type of stuff. I take a super hard line stance. That's just how I personally feel.
Yeah.
And I've never cared how big or small, how much someone works out. That's never bothered me. But then when you have these people in government saying, I can't enter a restaurant, I can't do this, like my stance on that is so hardline. And I think it's not just like it's all the left's fault. I think the right has kind of allowed it and gone along with it. But to me, and this is like, I have most of my family disagrees with me. I would say my whole family. I'm kind of the anomaly, as hard as I go with it. But it's like I don't think that they're going to take away certain things like in the future, like this theory. Like I saw them do it, and to me, what they did economically, like psychologically, physically, how they're still in New York City trying to force masks on 4-year-olds. To me, it's not like
At the schools, you mean?
Yeah. Well, just in general too, they're kicking people out of certain events. Like
I think because like whatever, maybe you're more extreme than me on these, so it's like forcing me to take the devil's advocate positions or whatever. But
good,
like,
yeah.
So I think there is those, but on the same time, like a lot of my friends who were, again, I was more of like an individualist in that I was like, yeah, I'm the fuck out of here, right? But you know what I mean? There was this other part where, how many times and I'm sure that maybe even someone like you or other people have been like, hey, they're gonna, these mask mandates are gonna be forever. Like these vaccine requirements are gonna be forever. This is just the start, blah, blah. And then that wasn't true. Like in New York, like, most like clubs don't do it. Like they all kind of got rolled back. Like you don't wear masks at comedy clubs anymore. Like, I don't know. Like, so
there's still a vaccine passport though. In New York City, my friend couldn't go to the Comedy Store because he needed a vaccine. So they
still have it. I mean, a lot of places don't have it, so they've rolled it back at a lot of places. But the Comedy Store has it. But that's like you have to understand who works there. Like
but still,
Hollywood
that's
actors.
The world for the unvaccinated shrinking. Now I can't go on a cruise. I can't go to a comedy. I mean, I'm like a slave. Like I'm a peasant, and I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not. I don't want the world to shrink for me. I don't want to be treated like I'm an animal from like 1930s, and I'm not.
No,
like,
I'm just saying
I can't access the same things. Like for me, that's
you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right, but I would just say that the some of the predictions did get rolled back.
We're too far.
Right?
We're over the top.
Well, it was like there was this conspiracy, but I think you even said this earlier in the podcast where you go, I actually don't necessarily think it's like some orchestrated conspiracy or just people that are kind of like out of control, like pandering to, fear mongering or whatever. Right.
Well, for this type of stuff, it's like a Frankenstein, you pass certain rules and laws. People are psychologically bought into the masks. I would say the people are now more pro mask than the politicians. Like they did so much, programming on media of mask, be afraid, be afraid. Now, when the politicians are trying to roll it back, whether it be in Canada or America, they're facing backlash after 2 years of them fear mongering people into feeling like they had to be this the whole way. So it's almost like they created a monster that they now can't stop. You have CNN Leana Wen analyst saying like, no, you don't need to do that. And you look at her comments and it's her own audience freaking out because she told them otherwise. But, for freedom and stuff here, this is my thought. And, to a lot, it's definitely a hard line. I've seen that it's not a popular opinion, but, I look at my ancestors, where they came from, my grandparents, how they came to this country. My grandfather started a trash business. Like I've learned about how hard they had to work for freedom. And I feel like our generation, the older generation, things have been so chill in Canada, America, that people are not really thinking about it too much. Right. But to me, I'm thinking like, if people don't value their freedom, they're going to lose it. So, I appreciate the debate because that's how you really iron sharpens iron when you challenge each other. But I would say, the world has.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I mean, you are right. Like I see that in Canada, and it was like the slippery slope thing. You go, well, this is what happens when there is no kind of opposition to this stuff. Yeah,
right.
There's no question that like that's why it was way wilder there. But then I guess you could maybe say on the other side where it's like, or I guess maybe you wouldn't say on this other side, but you know, when places like China, they were even more aggressive, right? And I don't
And they
know
still are.
what to call
They're
that.
locking down Shanghai again because they have like, you know, pretty much an authoritarian government that can do it at once. So they're actually back on lockdown. You
Yeah,
have
so it isn't
certain
really left to right. It's like this like authoritarian, not authoritarian. But yeah, like I guess I don't know. I know so many like Republican type, like, you know, boomer types that they were like very, very like, you know, they're like right wing, but they're very like pro vaccine,
right. Yeah.
mask, like
Oh,
all the
totally.
so that it's almost like a old person, young person, men, women, authoritarian. Like it's like there's so many different like splits here. It's like
Right.
it's yeah, that's
And
why Trump sort of split his base or whatever. It's like a weird like split of different people. Safety, you know, there's a lot of those like people, you know, Virginia moms that are super worried about fucking COVID or whatever, right? Like,
you're right about that. Like generationally, also gender. Like I found on average, women were more into the lockdowns and stuff.
of
Not always,
course.
because like a
Dude,
mom
every
queen,
single
you know.
person I know, every person I know in a relationship, it was kind of like, you know, the girl was pretty worried about it, and the guy's like, yeah,
Right.
like we might not be able to. My chick's worried about it. Like, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right, right. So you have the gender split, the political split, and then this is the crazy part about the media and how people bicker. I think one thing, like even speaking to you, one thing that makes you good at what you do and honest with your comedy is that you're not easily swayed by politics. Even me, I mean, I'm going hard about what I believe, and you're holding on to and asking questions, which is, I think that's what makes you great. Where like so many people don't realize, but it's such a sports team that I personally believe that if I was given the left wing media or the right wing media, I could literally make these people do anything. And I'm not even trying to be like mean about it, but people are so interested in their emotional team sports sort of thing. You go to other countries and it was the opposite. It was like liberals in the other countries were more interested in the right wingers. They wanted to do more. Like there's all these sort of racial, gender, like age gap things that
Yeah, who do you
also
think
played a
in like
part into
Saudi
it.
Arabia? Who do you think's more, you know, interested in like free speech or whatever,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
the
And they're more right.
conservatives are the
Right.
you're like not questioning anything.
And even though they're big into God, they're more, I would say, more right wing than conservatives on like women and stuff. They're also buying into the narrative harder because that culture is more used to being submissive to the you know to Allah. So they're more submit. Like if your
Oh,
leader
okay.
tells you to do, you know, the I'm not saying they think it comes from God, but I think it's stricter in some of these Arab countries because of that authoritarianism. And I think you nailed that with, you know, I don't know if you would call China left wing or right wing. They're like authoritarian communist, but it's like national communist. You know, it's
Yeah,
kind of
and
making
it's
sure of both, but it
nationalized.
is big government. I mean, if you're a billionaire like Elon Musk doesn't exist in Canada. I mean, in China, he would go missing. You know,
He
like
doesn't
because
exist in Canada either. I mean, he did. Now he moved, but no, you're right. I mean, there's a
right,
reason why everyone moves to America, and you know there is some like actual logistical things. But it's like if you watch what happens in those places, like you understand why it doesn't breed excellence, and that's just like the bottom line of any sort of thing. Where it's like if you have a
right.
family and you look at like, hey, do we spend more time on the kid that's failing everything, or do we spend more time on the kid that like you know might be the change the world, right? And I think that that's like the way that you just separate the two different types of people.
I have a book that G. Edward Griffin gave me. I haven't read it completely, but he told me to read it. And it was basically making the argument for the most creative, innovative philosophers, engineers, like the best people in society that created the most, they had the most freedom. So it'd be like classic liberalism where they let you do whatever, but also like, you know, no government intervention. So it was like right wing, you know, like libertarian, they let you do whatever, but people weren't restricting your thoughts. So it's like that breeds creativity and innovation. That's why I'm so against it here, hardline, because I'm
You know
like,
what it
oh,
is? You know what I think that like if and I think I've had this thought before, but like I think that I'm most comedian, but I'm also like okay, like I know a lot of dudes that are like entrepreneurs and stuff like that, right? Like even like Silicon Valley guys, and they've all now like moved to like Austin, like they've all moved to like Austin now, right?
right,
And in these like cycles of people being like, oh, it's for here, and I guess right or wrong, and maybe some people would call that like selfish or cowardly or whatever. But like I think there's two groups of people there now too. There's like the ones that moved there that are like, okay, let me just get back to my business now that I can do it. And then there's the ones that kind of are now like politically activated as like, hey, let's not let this happen here. And I'm going to start trying to do these organizations. And I think that at the end of the day, I'm probably in the first group that I'm like, which is what I did. I didn't move to America with the agenda of like giving you everyone like a warning of let's not turn this into Canada. Like I guess maybe I'm like if America goes to shit, like I'm out of here too.
No, but I
I'm
think
like one foot out the door.
I'm gonna compare you to Michael Jordan, not to toot your horn. No, but you reminded me when you said I focus on comedy. I watched the Jordan documentary. It's amazing. If you could watch it, Last Dance. I don't like a lot of documentaries, but it's great. He explained they wanted him to be like a Democrat, and he wouldn't do it. He said Republicans buy sneakers too, and they all got mad. But he explained in the documentary, he's like, listen, they were trying to bully me into being political. He said, but I focus on basketball. That's my craft. That's my passion. And through doing that, he wasn't just a selfish asshole. I think he made the world better through being great at his craft. And, I think when you said I focus on my comedy, you wouldn't really know it just listening. I mean, you live in this world, you think about stuff. So it's not like
it's truth too, right? Like you
absolutely. But that's why you're so good at it. And that's why it's so real is because you're not really being tied, but you focus on your craft where, I think that is an inspiring attitude at the end of the day, even with all the censorship, all my stance about free speech. I'm never playing the victim. You called your thing the white immigrant, which was hilarious, your new special. But it's like, even though, because like, yeah, I understand a lot of society saying, oh, if you're white, you can't say that, do that. Well, just do what you want. You know what I'm saying? No one's stopping me. No one's stopping you. Like, I don't care. There's always been obstacles. So, at the end of the day, regardless of what's going on, you have to make it happen. You got to work as hard as you can, focus on your craft. And no matter how many obstacles you have, you can't play the victim, which I think you're kind of seeing as well, where the right wing will tell, say like Black America, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Don't play the victim, which is good advice. But sometimes they don't even take it themselves, right? They're always playing the victim with all these things instead of just being like, yeah, they're happening, but here's our path.
On the comedy thing is probably you hit the nail on the head. And like the comedy thing was one of the most ones I've noticed it for, where it's like, a lot of people that were like right wing will say to me like, hey, why don't you like speak out about this thing or whatever? And I'm like, yo, you guys just like agreed with me for 2 years straight while I said that like comedians like need to shut up about like politics. Like they like we don't need to hear like every like talk show host telling us how to vote. Like, you know what I mean? That's not like good comedy. Right. And they were like, fuck yeah. And then they're like, yo, you should be telling people how to vote.
Right.
But like, and it was like, yeah. So I kind of, you just like, but again, I think that like greatness, I think I generally like do like people, you know what I mean? So it's like, I understand that most people to some degree are like kind of easily bought into, narratives of that. It's almost like in my personal life, like I've always, these guys that, like the Tinder swindlers and those, it's like, why does that work on girls? It's like, because you can manipulate people really easily. Like I really feel like I'm like, if I wanted to, I could probably really like con people, but you just try like not to. But it does tell you something about human nature, is that like people are almost like ripe. Like they're just sitting there like waiting to be conned.
Well, especially with media comedy, like I think the people who have a lot of power have realized this, like, owning a network is such a huge advantage, because if you sit there and stare at a screen for 6 hours and listen to a movie, it's what you're intaking. It's like reading a book. So, a lot of people don't consider that, but that's how, people learn how like cultural issues through Stephen Colbert, through a comedian. So you do have a lot of influence. A lot of people are looking for guidance and stuff. But I think like, in the clip where it was you doing the right wing and the left wing sales, where showing how they sell them, how the left wing is like aligned with all the big corporations and the right wing's just selling like freedom, dirt, and stuff like that. That was so funny because it's so true. Like, no matter what you think about, Alex Jones or Ben Shapiro, their ads are hilarious. And it's like, I saw Ben one time kind of segue, like he segued like the Holocaust into an ad where he was talking to Gina Carano, and he was like, Gina, listen, he's like, it's, I know that you're not anti-Semitic, and I know you didn't mean that when you said that about the Holocaust. And then I'm not even kidding, bro. The camera goes to a different camera, and he goes, and he's like, look, you need some bed sheets, I need some bed sheets, and I'm like, dude, like it was I have it saved on my Twitter where it was like a parody and a parody. Where how could you not make fun of that, even if you're right wing? Like the dude is literally segueing that into a freaking sale. Good. I want to try to see if I can find it, bro. Because with this platform, I could maybe download it and put it up. I want to get your reaction to it. Oh my god,
that's so fucking so good. That was the I think Dave Rubin recently tweeted that he was gonna like cancel his Disney thing. He'd already like he'd done that 3 other times where he was like, because of this new thing, I'm canceling my Disney or whatever. Then people had screenshots of him like a month ago saying he was canceling it for something else, and then this is the third time that he was canceling it.
Oh, so he already said, yeah, it's like
yeah, he'd already said he's
somebody
canceling.
likes Disney Plus. They got like, he's watching like Pinocchio on reruns or something. He just can't get enough. He's like, I'm really canceling it now. It's like, bro, if you need to watch cartoons that bad, just do what you got to do, but stop lying.
That Ben Shapiro thing's so funny. The left one too. I that one I feel like if I could have maybe more said like boomer right versus like kind of like corporate Democrat or whatever. Like, because really that's who it is. It's like NPR. Like they literally have like McDonald's ads or whatever. Like a lot of those ones that I did in that thing were for like NPR sponsors.
Yeah. All right, I found the clip of Shapiro. I want to play it just to prove I'm not making this up. It was I don't know if it was bed sheets, but we're about to find out. All right, I'm gonna play it.
Then we got to the one that they decided was worthwhile getting rid of you over. We'll get to the social media post that had to do with the Holocaust in just 1 second. First, let's talk about your sleep quality. You may have noticed that sometimes I look super tired because I have 3 children. And you may have noticed that Gina Carano, she's been saying that she is short on sleep.
Yo, can you
Yeah, I
believe
love it.
that, dude?
I love it.
He literally just says, he's like, listen, we're gonna get to the social media post about the
that rules.
first. And then the turn, he's like, Helix sheets. Oh my gosh, dude.
That's a good shit, man.
He knows it's like business savvy. He knows that's like the most heated moment, where he's like, you're gonna want to hear about this, but first. I love it. So funny.
Oh yeah, doing anything like mad serious, like the sponsor game is so funny. Actually, we wrote this movie and like we had a lot of that stuff in the movie, like all this like sponsor talk or whatever.
All right, you don't have to, because I don't want to get into someone's personal life, but I listen to Andrew Schultz. I know you're boys with them. Super fun guy. Yeah, he sells hair stuff sometimes, like hair regrowth, and I'm wondering, I'm like, is that for his bald supporters, or was he bald and he used it? I don't know, but that's one of the ones that makes me laugh.
No, we do. We do one of them. I think I've done Keeps, but they do like all sorts of stuff. It's just like dude supplements and pills, and one of the things is hair loss. But I don't think that. I don't think he was going bald ever. No.
He looks like he has a nice head of hair. That's why I'm asking, because I think he's like,
I think he's got a nice
I don't know if he said he used it, but like there's always the one.
Oh, he says he used it well. It's Keeps though, so I mean, whatever. It's not like going to break his bank. To why not? I mean, because even if you're not like male pattern, everyone's thinning. Like everyone's a little thinner than they used to be.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I just thought that was one of the ones that was pretty funny. Like, there's like that one, like everything Alex Jones does is funny. Like he could sell,
he's the best.
Anything, and it's just like he's just like, listen, it's a 30% sale. He's like, just for today. He's like, but he really does have really good products. Like his toothpaste is really good.
Oh yeah, the bunker vitamins.
I mean, he's got some fish oil. He's got his
bunker
toothpaste,
bucket.
His toothpaste, I really like. Like
he played that video too. Like he has such a good sense of humor too. Like Alex Jones is a funny dude. Yeah, he played it on InfoWars.
He's very self-aware, and he doesn't take himself seriously. Like he goes on Andrew, and like he plays into it super hard, because I think he has fun. He's such a stressed out guy, probably from talking about the New World Order for 40 years. That when he hangs out with Andrew, he's a funny, cool guy, I feel like. So like he's just letting loose, like it's probably the most fun he has, where he's like drinking alcohol with Logan Paul. He's like, hit me, he's like hit me. Like he loves that.
Yeah, so he's funny. A riot.
Yeah, let people know real quick your thing. I could also put it on the text. I'm gonna try to be fancy and put it up. But what's the name of your new special, the exact one? Because I wanna
White Immigrant at youtube.com/Ryan Long Comedy. So that's the special. It's been out for a few weeks now. White Immigrant, and my podcast is The Boys Cast with Ryan Long.
All right, so I'm gonna let's see if it goes up. See what I'm saying? Oh, White Immigrant Comedy Special, Ryan Long. You like that?
Yeah, this is good, dude. I wish I could stream like this.
You can. I'll give you the secret after this. But thank you for joining. Anything else? Any other place people could find you? This was, by the way, guys, the Dream Rare podcast. It's on Spotify, Apple, Podbean, anywhere podcasts are found. Just search Dream Rare podcast, and that's what it is. I'm always going to have one guest, one by myself, one guest, and just go back and forth.
That's the hardest place to get kicked off of, I feel like, is, like audio streaming platforms.
Right. That's what I'm on.
That's where you want people. Like I have a pretty good amount of people that just listen to the audio podcast. And honestly, even though my like, YouTube is big, like to me in my mind, those are my most like valued like thing because they
Well, it's big. They don't censor as much. And also, I mean, I'm starting to listen to more and more podcasts because it plays when other things are open and I could just do it on the go.
yeah,
It's definitely a growing thing. And I'm using it more as well. I like listening to long conversations.
totally. Yeah. No,
All
I
right.
was
Well, thanks for
okay.
joining me,
Yeah,
Ryan.
bro, yeah.
Make sure you
Thanks
check
for having
out
me
his
on, buddy.
special, guys. It's super funny. I watched it a couple days after it came out. Within the first couple days, it's super, super funny. So if you want to watch a good comedy special, watch that. Support Ryan and check him out when he's in your town live.
Appreciate you.